If AI and robots can do everything in the indistinguishable future better than humans, then what truly is our purpose?
The opportunity came up to enter venture capital. It's not really standard for like a student to end up in that position, but the opportunity came up and I got the chance to join there. And that's kind of what got my start into investing $50K in those companies as a institutional VC.
When you're talking about small molecule drug discovery, what is exactly you guys are trying to discover? Is there a problem set that probably you guys are trying to find solution, and where do you guys find these problem sets per se?
AI generated compound to eventually become a commercial drug that is sold on the market.
I had a co-founder in my last startup, and he tended to stray away from angel investors, sort of magnetized more towards VC. Can you speak on that? What is your personal favorite?
Angels are typically just high net worth individuals or people that have disposable income in order to invest in startups.
I do believe that in the next 5 to 10 years, about 80 to 90% of computer scientists will be obsolete, 100%. Hello guys, today we have Borna Shani, a LinkedIn connection and product management intern at Variational AI. How are you, Borna?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Sadra.
Of course, thanks for coming on and taking the time. I know it's a decent drive, but I appreciate it.
Of course. Happy to be here.
So, can you start us off and tell us about how you came from your journey and why you chose the path that you are on currently?
Yeah, so still pretty early on in the journey. Just still wrapping up studies at UBC, doing business and computer science. I'd kind of been in the tech and startup space since high school. I did this program called Beta Camp, which was a high school startup incubator during my summer before graduating high school, which would encourage and put you into teams and get people to identify a problem and then work on building a product or solution to solve that problem. And so that's kind of what got me into the startup and tech space to begin with. I got to be a startup advisor, kind of mentor for that same camp a couple of years later. And then the opportunity came up to enter venture capital, which, it's generally a pretty unique role. It's not really standard for a student to end up in that position, but there being student-run venture funds in Canada. One of them, the opportunity came up and I got the chance to join there. And that's kind of what got my start into the most one of the most formative experiences I have till now, which is actively investing in very early stage student founded startups, and investing $50K in those companies as a institutional VC, and supporting them on their journey, connecting them with investors, with other past founders that can help them on their journey. And through that process, one of the things I realized was I realized it was even more important to understand what it's like to be in a startup. And one of the areas I was really interested in was product and product management, because to me, a product is a core of a company's offering, right? That's what you're using to solve the problem at hand. And so it was a pretty core set of skills that I wanted to build. And so thankfully, I got the chance to end up on the startup side after being on the venture side, doing an internship there at a health tech VC, but also the student-run venture fund, to end up at kind of an AI drug discovery company, which is Variational AI, and working on kind of expanding the drug discovery platform that they have in terms of offerings that we have for chemists, which are the ultimate user of our product.
How do you approach effective product management? You mentioned that it kind of sparked your interest and you wanted to dive deeper into the realm, but so how do you approach it?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm still very new to the space, but I can definitely talk about what I've learned from lots of product managers that I've got the chance to learn from and talk to. There's a few things, right? The core of product management is understanding who you are building for and exactly what they require. So in my current role, right, this was a pretty unconventional type of user that you're building for, which is, for me, is chemists at biotech and pharmaceutical companies, right? Most people probably don't know a chemist that well. And so there was a lot of customer discovery I had to do at the beginning of my role, which is talking to my team, because we had a few of those types of chemists in our company. And so talking to those people, understanding how they use software, what their typical, tech literacy is, how tech savvy are they? What do they want to see from a tool that they're using? What types of tools do they use in their day-to-day, and what are they used to? So that understanding was really important, because if I was building something for like a consumer app or for students or typical internet companies, then that's the space that is easier to understand. But when it's a niche product, then that customer discovery is important, because that understanding has informed how I have helped design the features that we're implementing into this web app that I'm working on. And, identifying how things need to be designed, what the user wants to see on each page, how you design the flows, and the interactions that you have with that user. So yeah, customer discovery is pretty core.
The idea of variational AI is very interesting to me. Has it been done before, or like, are you guys going into the innovation route currently?
Yeah, so this is super, super cutting edge stuff that the team is doing. To kind of, from my understanding, I'm not deep on the machine learning side, but the understanding I've gained from our CTO, who has been in this space for 15, 20 years, is to date, for the domain of drug discovery in particular, no, there hasn't been any model that's been custom built, purpose built for chemistry. All of them have been either language models or computer vision models that have been trained to try and model molecule interactions. But what the industry recognized was that these models are insufficient for the complexity that is drug discovery, because, the process of drug discovery is, you can say, hey, I want to interact with these proteins, and I want to have these specific chemical properties for the compound that I will then synthesize and do, years of testing on to see if this can turn into a drug. And so what our company's done for about 5-6 years now is purpose build a model for chemistry, and specifically for drug discovery, small molecule drug discovery to be precise, and help actually generate compounds that are good starting points. And so the way we talk about it is, mid-journey for small molecule drug discovery, or the same way you would use ChatGPT to give you a starting point for your essay. We're able to output compounds that set ahead these drug discovery teams by, 6 to 12 months or more.
So traditionally, I believe before this model is, out in the public or even was created, can you walk us through how does that process used to look like? And when you're talking about small molecule drug discovery, what kind of drugs is there? Can you walk us through what is exactly you guys are trying to discover? Is there a problem set that probably you guys are trying to find solution, and where do you guys find these problem sets per se?
Yeah, good question. So typically before this, there was a variety of methods for generating hits, which is the name of like a compound that matches the baseline set of requirements that a chemist is looking for a new drug. There's things called high throughput screens that were really just testing variations of molecules in a sort of random fashion, so it wasn't really methodical. And yeah, pretty like legacy approaches, which I'm not all too familiar with. But sorry, what was the second part of your question?
I was like, what sort of solutions, like how do you guys approach the solution realm for the set of problems?
Yeah, so that's the interesting part about this, which is variational has focused specifically on the generation of molecules, which our product is called the 𝐚𝐭𝐜 lead generator. And the idea is that biotech companies and pharmaceutical companies, they are the ones coming up with what they think a new drug needs to look like, right? What proteins in the body it needs to hit, and for what purpose they're trying to build this. So, for example, a company could come to us and say, "Hey, we are looking to build a new drug to solve, diabetes, for example." Right. And they have a hypothesis about what this compound needs to do. And so they already have those specific chemical requirements, and they give those to us. And what we focused on is making sure that we can output what we try to do is, 50, 100 molecules that match those exact properties. And the process we're replacing is chemists a lot of the times doing very manual workflows, right? Basically using the set of known molecules that they have or that they know of or are, commonly available to make small adjustments and come up with a new molecule that both solves the problem or has the specific requirements that they are looking for, but is also novel, which is the other challenge, right? Coming up with something new that hasn't been tried before, but is also patentable from a commercial standpoint. And so the other value add of our product is not only does it generate compounds that match those exact requirements, but it's also ones that are novel. And so, which means that if a customer wants to move forward with a few of these drug candidates, they would be able to, patent it. We would assign the IP back to them. We would remove it from our model, so it's never generated again. And we're helping, not really change the commercial process within the industry, but help accelerate the process to hopefully, reduce from the notorious very long periods, because, biotech companies typically take 5, 6, 7, 8 years often to reach a point where their drug is commercially viable.
So basically what I got is that big pharma comes to you guys with a set of requirements. It's like, hey, these are the requirements that you guys need to meet. Maybe there's, different interactions with molecules or different sort of manipulations of how they interact with each other again. But you guys actually don't come up with the requirements. So they come up with the requirements. You guys just build it. You guys are like the factory. You guys are like, okay, we got the formula. Let's, do our tests and figure it out and hand it off to them.
Basically, yeah, that's exactly that. And that's what we've, because otherwise we're a therapeutics company as well, right? It's like that's a very different business model. But the focus is exactly on being the provider and supporting the ones that are developing new drugs. And taking their requirements, helping speed them up through that early process and get them into the synthesis and testing phase right away, instead of spending time coming up with the exact compound.
What are the trends that you see in the industry currently? Is there any trends that, like, for example, in the past 5 years, there's a new realm of subset of drugs that are being more popularized, or anything that you can tell?
I'm not too deep in this space, so don't have too many insights to give there, but I think the industry has recognized that this sort of purpose-built machine learning is important for the industry, and the previous methods have been proven to be not very effective for this purpose. And so there is a lot of validation around what a company like Variational is focusing on being the right area. And a lot of companies are looking to do partnerships with us now because it's been pretty proven. But the industry is at this point is now looking for the ultimate validation, which will be a AI generated compound to eventually become a commercial drug that is sold on the market, right? And that's a very long process to go to, but that would be the ultimate stamp of approval that this technology does actually work. For this industry, because there's many stages of testing and clinical trials and things like that need to go through, and so still a ways out from it being a standard for the industry.
So when you talk about testing, what does that look like? Like, you guys come up with how the protein or the molecule should be shaped in a way, and different substructures of it, and then you guys build it and have a live interaction with the target molecule that you guys are actually building it for? How do you test it effectively, really?
Yeah. Again, this is pretty deep stuff. I can speak to what I've very limitedly seen from customers, which is that there's a variety of modeling software and testing software that put this compound into various environments, test its interactions within different proteins in the body. Right. There's this process called lead optimization, which is basically testing exactly the interactions of this molecule. There's lots of various different software that helps teams do this, but the biggest, to my understanding, the most challenging period is the clinical trials, which is once on paper you can prove that this compound seems to work, right? Then you actually need to find ways to test it with potential patients. Or with patients that have that condition, to see if this can actually help improve their health. And so then you go into the clinical trial space using clinical research organizations, which is a whole nother step, which takes many years on its own, because you have to test it and then be able to prove that there's been a significant improvement in their health as a result of this specific drug. But yeah, that's not my field of expertise.
Yeah. I'm getting excited because there has been no one on this podcast that is in this field ever. And I love picking the brains of people that know things that I don't. I just want to go deep in that. So
I love it. I mean, maybe I gotta, we gotta connect you with someone from the company, but it's still, that's the cool thing about like these deep tech solutions, which is like, it really requires like an intersectional understanding, right? And you, for example, for the case of this company, like you need to understand deep machine learning, but also deep chemistry, right? Because you're working at that exact intersection. So yeah, I love it. It's been a great learning opportunity for me as well the last few months.
100%. Another question that I have, what are the benchmarks of a variational? Like how accurate are they? Can you walk us through like what's their process in the back end?
Not really. Again, our team is like, most of our team is like machine learning scientists and researchers. Like these guys have been, been working for like 10 years in this space to be at the point where they can actually work on generating a new, or working at the cutting edge in this space. But in terms of benchmarks, I think one of the core ones we do talk about is in terms of potency and the outputs of our model already being at the level of potency that is required within the industry, right? So, typically there's a standard for how good a compound is at doing something. And it takes a lot of refinement to reach that point. But our outputs are already at that point, which has given a lot of validation to chemists, which is like, oh, like this is, this is kind of a legit thing that I can work with. It's not just some random AI generated thing that doesn't really do what it says it would. But yeah, I don't want to get into the technical ML sides. I do have very surface level understanding, but it's some pretty deep stuff. I can maybe send you an article from our CTO after the podcast.
Yeah, I'd love to. And maybe if you can connect me to the CTO or the founder, I want to get deeper. I'm really enjoying this conversation.
For sure.
So, okay, let's move on to the next chapter, which is your VC side, which you've done for a period of time, and I think you stopped by now. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm not actively in VC anymore, but still pretty in the space.
Right. How does it look like when you personally or your company like gives you that set of requirements of which businesses or startups have to be, there should be a check mark, boom, 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 tick. These guys are a good fit for our organization. What does that look like?
Yeah, great question. So every investor has, I would say, kind of maybe two layers of quote unquote requirements. The first is pretty hard thematic requirements, right? Which is what the thesis of that firm is. So for example, at the student run fund that I was at, the requirements are being a student, having at least one student founder on the team, which is a current undergraduate, graduate, or PhD student, being incorporated in Canada, and also having raised less than $500,000 in dilutive funding, because we do really want to focus on that early stage. So if a company doesn't hit one of these requirements, we can't really consider them, because we've raised. So the reason for that is most VC funds, or a lot of them, have raised money from other investors, which are called LPs or GPs, so limited partners or general partners. And so these are people that are, high net worth individuals, other venture capital funds, government institutions, right? And an organization or a fund would go and raise a certain amount of money on a specific thesis, right? And so our student run fund had raised, $5.5 million on this exact thesis, which is student run early stage companies in Canada. So that's why you can't really divert away from that. And so those are pretty hard requirements. If a company's, if there's no student on the team, if they only graduated a few years ago, even, then it's not real eligible anymore. But the next step, which is the harder part, is analyzing the company to see whether, this is something you want to put your money into. And on one side, it's a priority game, right? Like within the theme, within the space that you invest, you want to invest in the best ones, right? And so a lot of times you might feel that the way you're analyzing the company needs to also be in the light of that specific space. So if you're investing in early stage companies, right, you can't expect them to have a lot of traction or already have a bunch of revenue, for example, right? At the pre-seed stage, especially, you are looking for primarily validation in the founders, right? In their skill, in their past accomplishments, and in their characteristics that you think could make them successful founders, right? And building this company into a unicorn. That's generally the bar you want to be having the upper bound for. The other thing is especially important is the market, right? Is this team focusing on a space that is important, has pull? There's people that are experiencing a very deep problem or a bleeding neck wound per se, which means an immediate problem that will help this company grow substantially because they are focusing on a problem that people are deeply feeling and would be attracted to a product like this. So, once you get to the later stages of investment, every VC or investor, I say VC or other investor because there can be VCs, there's family offices, there's angel funds, lots of different structures. But there can be a lot of requirements and people that would have different risk thresholds on various different criteria. And so that's why each investor would kind of have their own style because the people there have certain things that they believe to be more important than others. And so whereas, if me and you were both investors, we could see a cool company, I might feel that it's worth investing in, and you might feel that it's not, even if we're both active in the same space. And so I think that's what makes the whole industry exciting because at the end of the day, like startups are extreme bets. Most of them go out of business or don't really return you any money as an investor. But everyone's looking to find, the one that is able to, grow a lot and bring a lot of return for you as an investor and the people that invested in your fund.
For people that don't know, can you explain to us what's the difference between VC, angel, and other subsections of that equation?
Yeah, for sure. So a VC is called a venture capital fund, right? And those are ones that have raised funds, typically from an external organization. There can be various structures. There can be typical LP/GP funds, which means there's a lot of different people and organizations in that fund that have invested. It could be, there's typically smaller investors, there's bigger investors that kind of anchor the fund, quote unquote, which means they do a very large portion of it and in backing that organization. So, your Sequoias, your A16Z, your any big venture capital firm kind of follows this structure. There's also solo GP funds. So for example, some organization will put aside a lot of money and start a venture arm or a venture capital fund. And so, for example, we have a lot of corporate venture capital funds. So for example, Deloitte, right? It's an accounting firm, accounting and consulting firm, but they have a venture arm. TELUS has a venture arm, which is, they have a lot of retained earnings and they portion off a part of their revenues into investing into startups. And so that's kind of solo GP because the only person funding that venture capital group is that one company. Angels are typically just high net worth individuals or people that have, disposable income in order to invest in startups. Typically, these are people that have are previous founders, investors, operators, or C-suite level executives that have, a thesis and they want to invest in companies typically in their own space or spaces that they're excited about. Angel groups or angel syndicates are basically groups of angels that come together and make investments so they can have a bigger check size as a group, right? So, if I'm an angel, typically I wouldn't be able to invest in one company more than $10, $15, $20,000, or sometimes less. But as a group, right, then we're able to say, okay, our angel group is called, for example, we have one called Angel Forum. We have one called 𝐸𝐴𝐻𝑒𝑡su Forum in Vancouver. And so these try to make group investments. They're like, okay, so we want to invest in this company. We can put in now 150, 200,000, making it a more meaningful amount that makes it easier for each of those angels, but also easier for that company that wants to receive that investment.
I mean, traditionally, personally, I had a co-founder in my last startup, and he tended to stray away from angel investors and sort of magnetize more towards VC. Can you speak on that? What is your personal favorite?
Yeah. I mean, to some extent, I think that's understandable because at the end of the day, I think there's this metaphor I've heard, which is, your investors are or your spouse, or it's a marriage that you can't leave, right? And that's because every investor, it's someone that's going to be on your cap table. They have shares in your company and ultimately have, proportional say to that amount. And it's very hard for you to, get rid of them after that. So angels, I think people try to only bring them on or have them as investors if they feel that they have a very valuable expertise to their company. Right. So which is why we see a lot of angels typically become advisors for those companies, because they back it from the early stages. The founder sees that person as an advisor and someone that has experience that can help grow the company. But at the end of the day, angel syndicates, that is the risks with them, which is that, you're bringing on a group of people that are going to be shareholders in your company. You don't personally maybe know each of these people. And so it may feel that, you're going to have shareholders in your company that may not be fully mission aligned with where you're headed, may not all have significant expertise to contribute to your specific company. But yeah, so I think it's fair for some founders to feel that they want to prioritize VC investments, but it also just depends on the market, the space that you're in, how much demand that you're getting. So, do you get to be picky about the money you're taking, or sometimes it's like, money is money and I just need that to go through this hump of the company. And so then I would be in a more position to maybe be a more attractive investment.
So you are also a computer scientist.
Still a student, but yeah.
Still a student. Can you speak on how the space has had an evolution, and with the rise of AI, what do you think it will look like in 5 years? I may have some ideas. Like, I just want to get sort of your point of view, because you have been active in, VC realm, your studies, obviously, and intern in an AI company as well. So how do you see the space going? What do you think you'll be doing in the next 3 to 5 years personally?
So, I mean, my opinions are kind of changing on where the field is headed, I think, week to week based on different conversations. I think what we are seeing is obviously in tech, right? Being, people being tech savvy and wanting to try different tools that come out, right? AI is adding a lot of bandwidth and capability to people that are working, right? And so what we've seen is, I think a lot of roles have become more competitive because the top percentage, or maybe the top like 50% of candidates in each role, have found ways to use AI to increase their output and productivity as a person and as an employee. And so if you haven't kept up with that, then ultimately, hiring one of those people that have increased their productivity is going to bring a lot more value for a company that is looking to hire that talent, whether this is in, product management, software engineering, design, etc. So I think it's been increasingly important to use these tools to add to your skill sets as a person and the level of productivity that you're able to bring to a company that you're working at, or possibly your own company, right? And we've seen a lot of companies that have tried to use AI to its fullest before they even look outwards to hiring more people. I don't know if you saw the Shopify CEO had a memo, and that's exactly what he was talking about. He said, "Do not ask me for hiring for your team unless you can prove to me that there's no AI tool that can help add that bandwidth or solve that problem or have that skill set that we're looking for." Which was a bit controversial at the time, but I think people are realizing that, that's kind of an orientation that we need to be taking in order to really find the areas that AI can add value and also find the areas where it can't. But I think that's a increasing something that everyone's learning about. For me, the goal has been to get experience in areas that yield as much growth for me as I can. I think that's the orientation I think everyone should have during university and afterwards, because for me, like, it's not necessarily compensation, which is the number one, but it's the growth. So yeah, I think being in like the startup space and being in this fast-paced environment is what can yield the most growth for me. So that's the kind of area that I'm kind of in right now, but hoping to be more involved in. But what do you think, though? I'm curious from your experience with your startup. Where do you see this headed, or do you try to use some of these tactics in your own company?
Well, it's actually very interesting because, in our studies back in university, we would learn many various different languages, programming languages. We'd go low-level code, solve this sort of niche problems. But then now, in my startup, I maybe code like a very, very, very small amount. And it's mostly has come down to prompt engineering, personally, as I see it. So how can you elaborate your thought process into the AI in a nicely organized prompt that it knows exactly what you want and it can output the results that you want? And that is a skill that I would recommend everyone to pick up and even start learning, because it can really add so much value to your character and your abilities. Like, for example, I had a guest on my podcast about 4 days ago, and he's very successful, but he was like, I need a prompt engineering for this aspect of my business, and we're having a meeting Monday to dive deep. So I'm using that for my startup, but also I'm seeing a value as a consultant for other businesses as well. But I believe I may have a bit of a pessimistic view on this, but I do believe that in the next 5 to 10 years, like about 80 to 90% of computer scientists will be obsolete, 100%. And it is what it is. It's very unfortunate, and maybe it will come as a domino effect to other sectors as well, as you can see artists or copywriters, and it just goes on and on with robots as well. No one's safe. But it's the new age world, and I always ask this question at the end of the podcast, which is, what do you think is the meaning of life? Which kind of draws back to, if AI and robots can do everything in the indistinguishable future better than humans, then what truly is our purpose? And hopefully it doesn't come down to that, but the technology, the projection seems to be going that way, and there is no stop that I can personally see.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I mean, a lot of people draw this along these same lines and say, okay, so then AI is going to put us into an age of creativity where everyone has a lot of agency and they can create things independently, even if it's not, being as officially hired at a company, right? Because obviously companies will be looking to make themselves more efficient and save as much money as they can, especially on, wages and salaries, which are typically the biggest expense for a lot of companies. But do you think we can head to this era where, people are using all these AI tools to generate new things, to build their own companies, to contribute to the world and make a living in different ways?
Well, there's a stat that I saw that by 2035, the traditional 9-to-5 job will be obsolete. So pretty much everyone will have their own maybe solo business or just a side hustle that they will be generating income and provide value to each other. But there's this utopia world that you just mentioned, that everyone will be creative, it'll be an awesome world, you don't have to work anymore, you can just do whatever you want. And I would love to believe that, but I mean, the trajectory of humanity and human life has not been towards that, unfortunately. There's the historical round that between 1930s to 1960s, we were, as like the people living through that 30-year era, were the richest of the whole human timeline. But then as we go on and on, there's inflation, our dollars is, becoming less valuable, and it's actually becoming worse and worse as years go on from those golden eras. So if it was going better, I would be more of a believer of the utopia, but there has to be a major change in the full infrastructure of, how everything's set up, in my opinion, for us to get there. But hopefully it gets there. I don't want to be too pessimistic, but we shall see, really.
Yeah, totally. And it is scary. And I think a lot of times we maybe gloss over that. But I think it's something that at the end of the day, like, there will come a point where we will actively see that trade-off happening, which is, a company can choose to adopt a legion of robots that will put thousands of workers out of business, right? Think of, I don't know, the Amazon delivery system or the warehouses they have. They employ, tens of thousands of people. Technically, a lot of it can be automated. I don't know if, how close we are to getting there, but I think a lot of the media we've seen and like the dystopian, I don't know, I think of WALL-E, for example, right? Where no one really needs to do anything anymore. And you just kind of like sit in your chair and things just kind of happen for you, right? I like to hope that, people don't forget those things. And at some point we have to put aside things like profit and efficiency and say, okay, like, what makes the most sense for humanity, or what direction should we be going as people?
Yeah, 100%. From all these emerging new technologies in this era, quantum computing is one of my favorites, because the fact that it has pretty much proven that there are parallel universes and there are like 11 dimensions. We are stuck in the third, but I mean, it's unbelievable how this universe is so vast and there's so many layers that we can never tap into. And I think it's pretty much proven that we live in a frequency world. Like, everything is sound and frequency, as Nikola Tesla said tens of years ago. And it's a crazy world truly to live in. And sometimes it's good to step back and see, how has this all come to be and where we live truly.
Yeah. That's something I've been seeing too. It's like, you look around and it's like, we drive cars, we live in houses that, don't break down, or we don't have to worry about rain and all these things, that it's like, how far humanity has come, and the many things that we get to benefit in 2025.
100%. We read that outside of work, you enjoy taekwondo and kickboxing training. Do you find any parallels between martial arts and entrepreneurship?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think the first one that comes to mind is discipline. Entrepreneurship is very unstructured environment. You are by your own clock, by your own time, by your own planning, and the way you go about things, in the many, many activities that you have to take care of as an entrepreneur for your company, whether that's sales, product development, finances, marketing, etc. And that is, I think, discipline is the core skill that is emphasized in most martial arts, partially coming from the cultures that those martial arts each are born out of. In the case of Taekwondo being like Korean culture. And I think it's, that's why I think a lot of athletes, for example, have lots of great discipline and motivational things to talk about, right? Like, you've seen the things people like Kobe, people like Ronaldo have talked about in terms of mental fortitude, discipline, consistency, right? Those are characteristics that if you are going a very long way, going on a long journey that doesn't have a lot of expectations set on you, but it comes from you, then being pro level athletes, doing things like martial arts that have those aspects kind of built into the teachings, how the classes are run, the different activities and training aspects that you do within those martial arts, can translate over to entrepreneurship. And but it's a very high, I think it's a long way to go. Like, personally, I think there's still a lot of discipline aspects I can work on, but the amount that I do have, I think I can attribute it to, martial arts.
Discipline is the name of the game. I mean, it's truly, if you had to master one thing to become successful, I believe it would be discipline. But then there's other sayings like, if you just focus on discipline, it may not be as potent as if you have a true why as to why you're doing this. I hear from many successful people that if you're just doing this for yourself in sort of selfish way, that I want to be successful because of fancy cars or materialistic things, it wouldn't be as a fuel to drive you then like, I want to do it to give back to my family, to see my mother have her dream vacation, or, you know, doing it for others in the community. And maybe from that it comes discipline, or from discipline it comes that. Which way do you think that's the case?
That's a great question. The thought that came to mind right now is that discipline can come from other or higher order things, right? I think like purpose, for example, ultimately to life and the impact that it can have for someone is higher than discipline, right? Because at the end of the day, discipline is a skill, right? But a purpose is like a guiding principle, right? And I think what can strengthen that is, you know, I did a quick presentation on this a couple months ago about your purpose not being a goal that is achievable, right? It's not like a specific event that needs to happen. But if you're able to find a guiding principle for your life, what your why is, right? Whether that's, like you said, giving back, whether that's, you know, it could even be like personal achievement, right? It's like, I want to reach this goal in order to do this, right? Maybe it's just like, hey, I want to live be able to give a life to my family that I didn't have as someone, right? That can be an equally motivating purpose. And if you're able to derive a purpose that is meaningful to you, then that will automatically, like you said, bring discipline. And ultimately maybe a stronger one, right? Because discipline on its own is not grounded in anything. But if you're able to cultivate your discipline in tandem with a guiding principle and a purpose that you see yourself pursuing, then I think, you know, pretty dangerous combo.
What kind of exercise would you recommend to people that maybe haven't fully found their purpose and are wanting to?
I think there's a few ways, you know, thinking about the things that have helped me develop my purpose, or, you know, move forward on it. I won't be conclusive, but I think there's a lot of good media, a lot of like great movies that have explored topics like this and can get you really thinking about it. Movies like 𝐦𝐭𝐜𝐡, the Pixar movie, like Soul, also a Pixar movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once, right? I think consuming media that helps you think is, you know, one of my favorite things to do. But it's also just conversation, right? I think it's, you know, talking to other people, traveling, you know, understanding the motivations of the people around you. Because ultimately, if you're able to understand how different people are approaching life, whether you think that they're doing it well or not, right? Those can help you develop what you think is ultimately important. And also, I think it just needs some like soul searching and reflection, thinking about your life experiences, what has been important to you, what you've developed, and also maybe the challenges that you've gone through. And yeah, also just like looking at the things you've done and what has given you the most satisfaction, right? And then maybe drilling down into why that thing had been giving you satisfaction. Maybe someone will think back and say, hey, like, you know, that one time that I volunteered at a homeless shelter, right? Or, you know, we distributed food to homeless people. That is when I felt the most fulfilled, you know, aside from whatever job I've ever had, right? And so maybe that can be an opportunity for them to invest more time into that thing. And you know, spend more time on the things that fulfill them, and then help figure out what that ultimate purpose can be.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because like thinking about my personal journey, when I play badminton, I feel like this is the best time there could ever be. I wouldn't want to do anything else. But then it also comes down to the top 1 the number one badminton player in the world, Victor Axelsen, I believe right now, makes like $1 million a year. So it's like, you'd love to do that, but then also it's not gonna sustain you realistically speaking. Because even if I'm 24 now, I had my birthday a couple days ago.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. And I can never get to number one, and either it can't be a life around that. So do you think it's all about purpose, or is it also you have to think about other things as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I'm curious to get what you think, because I think like, loving something like badminton and having a lot of satisfaction from that, or a sport, is an interesting example, because it's like, it's hard. It may be difficult to make that your purpose, or like, it's a very challenging field to break into. There might be a point where you're like, okay, so maybe I can't go pro in this anymore. Right. And so I need to find something else to be my primary pursuit. I don't know. That's what do you think? I want to get you to keep going on about that.
I think that you can do those activities and like still have fun with them, but I mean, I get reminded of a quote by Alex Hormozy. I mean, the GOAT, truly. I listen to him exclusively podcast wise, and also this one. But Alex Hormozy says that follow your passion is BS, as they call it. You will do something enough times that you create passion around it. So then I may be passionate, or I think badminton is my purpose and I'm playing it, I love it, and it's great. But also, if I do something that is of value to others, because badminton's sort of selfish. Like, you are playing it yourself, maybe with someone else, so I guess someone else is enjoying it as well if they are to that level. But it's mostly selfish. So if you do something that is of value to the community, because humans are very community oriented, and you would think about the best sort of neighborhood is that everyone is giving back to each other, very tight bond. And so I think pursuing that will also give you passion in that realm, because you're following it to the end goal and you have the discipline behind it. It's interesting how it seems like a circular loop, but I think it's balance at the end of the day as well. Like, you can do what you love, but also you have to create passion about what really can provide as well.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing that just came to mind is there almost maybe needs to be a higher purpose to whatever you are passionate about, right? Because even if you're able to practice badminton at the highest level, at some point, especially with something like sports, you're going to have to retire at some point. And you're not going to retire when you're 80, right? When you're, slowed down that much, but you're going to retire when you're 40. And that's when, you still need to make a living. You still have a career ahead of you. And so if you're able to have a higher purpose or guiding principle that, had you in pursuit of a sport at a very pro level at first, but then that helps you find a different direction to take that. Whether it's like, I'm really passionate about this and I want to spread this joy for other people. And so that's when people go into coaching or they start a badminton academy, right? But I think that the sense of like, the crises or the midlife or quarter life crises, like they come because something changed or something that you were in pursuit of is no longer available, or your perspective has changed deeply. And so if you're able to have a guiding purpose at the end of the day, which is, I know that I'm going in pursuit of this thing, and that idea helps define my actions, my perspective, my mindset, and the type of person I want to be, then you always kind of have an anchor for yourself, regardless of what happens in your life day to day. And I know this is pretty like grand statement to be making. I've definitely, still had my, crises where you feel like, okay, what am I doing? Like, what am I spending my time on? But I don't know. I think that's something worth, prioritizing and thinking about.
I definitely agree, and I like the fact that you brought light into this matter, that even if from purely playing badminton you can't get the joy until the rest of your life, like when you get older, you can just try to figure out, how can I make money? If you really love doing that, then you'll find a way. Like, it comes down to just sticking with it, really. And it's funny because, again, Alex Hormozy says that people just get a sudden dopamine from when they start a new endeavor, and they just don't stick with it. They're just hoppers. They hop around. They're like, they start a new endeavor. They get to a certain level, and it's a different hard, because hard is the name of the game. Like, and so it's a different hard. They're like, oh, I don't know, maybe this lady in the red dress. So I was listening to him earlier, so that's why I got reminded by him.
Yeah.
With over 20 billion poured into generative AI deals in early 2024 alone, every startup seems to claim it's AI powered. As a past investor, how do you separate real game-changing innovations with buzzword hype?
Okay, great question. First of all, it's a pretty hard exercise. In Front Row Ventures, which is our student-run fund, we have a pretty big team in each chapter, and so that's a pretty big topic of conversation every time we have a new AI company that we're discussing. And I think like the core principles that it can come down to is like defensibility or replicability. That's one way to think about it, which is how difficult is it, that what feat has this company achieved that is making it exciting as an investment? Right? Are they doing something that's, can be completely could they completely go out of business at an update from Google or OpenAI, right? Like, for example, Google launched this feature with Gemini, which is, able to take a piece of clothing, have a picture of your body, and then put that piece of clothing on your body to show you how you would look in that outfit. There was tons of startups doing exactly that, right? And now most of them, not yet, because they're still figuring out the distribution, but in the long run, they may not really be a winner in that space, because they, the big player that is the model provider at the end of the day incorporated this feature because it wasn't complex enough. So there's one thing, which is, finding domains that are more difficult to apply AI to, one, and two, which is a big model provider may not be interested in that space for whatever reason. And that's why like vertical AI is very, is kind of the word that investors throw around, which is, if AI is being applied to something like home service businesses, right? It's like, let's have a voice AI solution for, there's a company doing this called Outreach Genius. They have a voice AI solution for plumbers, HVAC, the people that come into your home, right? Like, these guys are not very tech savvy people necessarily, but doesn't mean they don't have like a funnel problem, which this company is trying to solve, which is, customers coming in, you not being able to pick up the phone, and now they're gone to someone else because you didn't have like someone able to pick up the phone at all times. You're always driving around, you're in your truck, you can't answer the phone, right? So that's why the focus has been on specific verticals, right? It's like, what specific problem for a niche group of people is this company trying to solve? But the other thing at the end of the day has been distribution, right? Because businesses are, at the end of the day, if they're able to reach a very significant revenue mark or market share, right? They could then ultimately be, consolidated in another company. That's when exits happen and acquisitions. But that's the kind of two things you want to be focusing on is this company solving a niche problem that doesn't have a lot of competition? Or if there is other people focusing on that space, do they have the distribution? Do they have the growth and the skill to be able to grow and actually capture the market share and become a winner in that specific solution? So there's a lot of discuss we could discuss about that, but that's a couple ways that we try to think about.
When you talk about scale, what are the top 5 skills that you are personally looking for in a founder?
Great question. I think the first is like grit and commitment, right? Because as we've discussed, challenges of being an entrepreneur, there's various things you have to dealing with. Discipline is a big part of that, but the overarching skill of that is grit, right? Someone that's able to commit to something for a long period of time and see it through its development, through its highs and lows. So that's why the biggest credibility for a founder is a previous exited founder, right? Which is, this is their second company or their third company, their last company, they exited it for this amount, which means, they had some level of, pretty good success in building that company. But, it becomes hard when you're investing in younger founders, right? Because necessarily this would be a first time company for them. But there's other ways that you can gauge that. That's one. The second, I think, is passion for the space that they're working on, right? You can be excited about building a company, but if you're not excited about solving this problem for this specific group of people, there's a chance that at some point you're going to pivot away. You're not going to feel like this is, giving you the satisfaction that you had. Because, you're going to be in the trenches, like working with these people, understanding them as people, as users, knowing how to sell to them, how to market to them. So you want to make sure you are really committed to that. I think for the case of, software companies, your CEO should have both business and technical acumen, because you need to understand how to be scaling your product. That can't just be the job of your CTO, right? There needs to be some level of shared understanding of both sides by co-founders, right? And so you want your founders to be well-versed in different parts of building a company, but also have shown the ability to learn something or learn about something to a very significant level from scratch, right? One question we like to ask is like, when was a time that you had to learn or go deep on a very specific field in a short period of time, right? And so can this person throw themselves at something, become a, quote unquote expert in that in a period, because their company will need that all the time, right? And you're going to realize that your company needs you to understand something, and you need to be able to go and understand that in the fastest time possible. So yeah, that was all over the place, but that's a few of the characteristics.
No, 100%. I mean, it definitely makes sense. The grit part, it's obvious why it's number one, because 99% of startups fail. So if you can stick by the lows and the highs, then you're not a sway in the wind, as they call it. You're anchored. Are there any emerging science or technology domains you're personally excited to explore in the coming years?
There's a few areas. I think one of them is AI search, specifically in the field of AI. That's one thing I'm really interested about, what companies like Perplexity and 𝐸𝐸𝐴 are working on. Because, I think it's one of those examples of things that we kind of taken as status quo, right? Like search, for example. Everyone's used to, okay, I need to find a piece of information. I'm going to search some keywords on Google, and then I'm going to, look at all these different articles until I find the solution that I have, right? But ultimately, but when we have the chance to talk to somebody that knows a field, we'd much rather talk to them than go on Google to find that information, because I have to actually find the answer to my question versus an expert would be able to give me that answer directly. So I think that's like the biggest leap with AI search that we've seen, which is, you basically have something you can talk to that knows pretty much everything on the internet, right? And so you can ask it questions and it will directly be able to give you that answer. And I think that time save for, like we said, when you need to research something as an employee, as an entrepreneur, whether you're just like searching for hotels to stay at, right? Like the number of applications of this is very wide, and that's one thing I'm really interested in. There's two other fields in health and education. I think health is really big because health ultimately is like it's a very high multi-parameter, optimization problem, or quote unquote optimization. There's a lot of different factors that can affect someone's health, right? And so if we're able to use AI to find the specific combinations or trends within the data that can help us tell what sorts of conditions people are predisposed to, right? That can be huge in prevention of, a lot of chronic conditions that people carry for many, many years. In education as well, I think, the age-old discussion of the personalization of education, right? That's been a big challenge because it's always relied on training a teacher to understand exactly what the different style of each student is, know how to cater their teaching to each of those people, but ultimately it's a difficult thing to do. So I think technology can be a big advantage in that front is finding ways to make sure education is as personalized and as valuable to each person, to each student at all levels. But the difficult part being, also maintaining that human interaction, because we know that's important for learning as well, especially at early stages. So
I read a research the other day that as we rely more and more on AI giving us the answers and sort of biting and chewing it and just feeding it to us, the more and more we're not going to be using parts of our brain, and they will shrink over time, which was interesting. So the technology comes with a double-edged sword, but I believe the benefits is better than its negatives. Maybe. I'm not sure. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that, and something I think is pretty undeniable. Like, we grew up in a generation where we just save phone numbers on our phone, whereas our parents maybe had to actually remember phone numbers, right? Because, you need to call someone, you're not going to have a phone book with you at all times. And so maybe as a result, our memories of small things, that muscle hasn't been trained. So I totally agree that I think like there's areas of our brain and capability as people that we're not going to use anymore if we go too far with this. But I also don't know how you can find the balance within that, right? Like, is there at some point where we say, okay, do we need to count on the discipline of people to say, okay, I'm not going to use this better tool for something because I want to develop my brain more and make sure I'm, not losing certain skill sets? Or is it like, as innovators, right? Like maybe the innovators need to be making the call of, this is maybe not the best way to go, but then, there's always profit and at the end of the day. And so who do we count on to keep this in mind? What do you think?
I think you mentioned that, do we count on ourselves? Because I believe humans are innately lazy. If you look at our biology, we always try to use the least amount of energy in various ways our brain works and our thought process has done. And as you mentioned, CEOs have dollar signs in front of their eyes, and the AI killing us all in the existential crisis is also a deal because there's a race right now. It's like China's gonna get to AGI first. No, we have to get there first. And there's this atmosphere that's creating, and no one really talks about the safety aspect of it. Because if we eventually build a super intelligence that is in the future thousands of times smarter than the collective intelligence of humans, I mean, we're like the anthill. I mean, I've said it many times in the podcast, but the anthill that we don't want to kill it, but they're just in our way. So when we're building a road.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I think is hard to answer. I think one way to maybe think about it is trying to adopt a purpose mindset for what innovation is going towards, right? Like if we talk about AGI, right? As much as we talk about how to get to AGI, we maybe need to talk about what is AGI going to do? What is a world with AGI going to look like? Because if we postpone that idea too much or that discussion, then we're going to reach a point where AGI is ready to go, and companies have already seen all the ways that they can make money off of this technology, right? And then the people at the end of the day, we're going to move closer to the Wall-E world,
But can we know what what the world with AGI look like? Can we know that? Imagine you're an ant and you see these giants walking around, they're doing stuff. You don't know what's going on in the human's brain per se, because your perspective is just different. So if there's something thousands of times more intelligent than we don't even know how it's going to think. Like, what is its goal? Like, I don't know. It's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, there's lots of movies about AI going rogue, right? And like if you give it too much power. But I think at the end of the day, the other thing I think I'm an optimist, so you might disagree with me, but the people running these companies and working on this technology at the end of the day are people, right? Like Elon Musk is like super active in the AI and tech space, but like he's one of the people that has been most forward about the threats of AI to humanity, right? And so I think it's like we have to bring that humanity out of the people that are working on this technology and make it be more top of mind, right? Something that is a topic of discussion when you're working on the next iteration of something, and a new breakthrough that is increasing the capability of AI and moving us closer to AGI, because we have to, like, it's going to depend on it, right? Like if you that's why people like Elon, I think, are very adamant about this, which is like you feel people aren't talking about this thing that is important to be considering, even if we don't know what that world looks like.
We only have one shot.
Yeah.
If it's messed up, I mean, it's game over.
I mean, we're already killing the planet, so we got to make sure this one doesn't do that either.
Inshallah. Let's put our hands into the CEOs and see where they take us.
Yeah.
How can my listeners build the skills and network needed for that early exposure and break into the venture world?
Specifically venture, like the VC investing space?
We go for venture. We go for maybe the success mindset, the startup, just tying everything together, really.
Yeah. Something that a mentor told me, sometime last year, was if there's something you want to be doing, then you can't wait for someone to give you that job to then start doing it. You have to be already doing the job and showing that you have the skills, that you do the work, right? And someone's just going to say, oh, like this guy already knows what he's doing, so I'm going to, give him this opportunity. So that changed my mindset quite a bit, because, if you think you're confident and you have certain skills and you're capable of doing something, you should find ways to be doing it on your own, because that's the best way for you to prove to someone else that you're capable of doing something. And so in the case of startup, I think that means building things, putting it out into the world, getting users, testing it, learning from that, right? It's probably one of the most accessible avenues for people to build things. I think you can tell me more as a founder. And in like the venture and investing space, it's like, do what people in venture are doing, which is studying spaces, analyzing industries, having opinions about what things do have potential and what things don't, consuming that media, just acting as if you're already in that industry. So then when the time comes, when you have an interview, for example, you're not going to be scrambling to figure out what you need to say, because you've already been doing the work and you have your character has been built around that. You have things to talk about and discuss with your interviewer about that topic, and you can show that you have the skills.
It's interesting you mentioned media. You mentioned a couple movies, 3 movies from Pixar and stuff like that, but what kind of media do you personally consume that has shaped your mindset currently?
I mean, the one example is what we talked about earlier, which was, getting me to think about what the purpose of life is, what kind of pursuits I want to pursue. And, the movies I discussed earlier, those were kind of that. There's another show called Vinland Saga, which talks about that exactly, which is like this guy pursues a goal for a while, but then that goal goes away. And so he has to kind of reinvent himself and discover his own purpose. But the other media has just been, I think media is good to a degree. I think podcasts, I like to listen to a few podcasts from time to time, because ultimately, like, that's a way for you to engage yourself and get you to think about the types of topics that you want to be thinking about, the types of people you think that you can learn from or have interesting perspectives that can help develop your own perspectives and help you understand what type of person you want to be. But above all else, I think, the best form of media is just talking to people, right? Like one-on-one, getting people that you think are interesting, finding ways to learn from them. And I think for young people, especially, that's very accessible. Like generally people are willing to help young people, give advice, help them find and go along their journey. Especially the ones that, again, are showing that they're taking initiative and they want to achieve things. So many people I know, and me myself personally, have just benefited from mentors that have, been invested in your growth as a person, because of the relationship you've built with them, because of the contribution you've had to whatever space that they're in. So, but I do consume some media, but the best form of media is conversation.
What challenges you?
At a career level or a personal level?
Something that you just haven't gone the full grasp on, something that still bothers you to a certain degree. You're like, I want to figure this out, but I still just haven't been able to.
Yeah. I think one pretty big one is the efficiency topic. Everyone's always trying to increase their productivity, right, through all these tech tools or personal methods, right? And I've like learned a lot from those. I'm not like a productivity nerd. I don't have a million pieces of software I use, but there's been things that have helped me increase my efficiency as I've grown. But also sometimes it still feels like there's still a long way to go, or there's the bar is still very high, or the upper bound is. And so, it gets you thinking. Sometimes it's like, you never feel like it's enough, and you have to like keep working and increase your capacity as a person. But, on the other hand of that, I think it's just been a matter of prioritization, right? It's like, you're never going to be able to increase your efficiency to the point where you're able to do everything that you want to do or want to have the time for. So you have to change your priorities from time to time. But what do you think about that?
I think you put it perfectly. The priority is the number one thing. I believe that you need to set your priorities straight right off the bat and really stick to them.
Yeah.
And the efficiency route, I do agree, because, what is the average scrolling on a daily basis of an average person in this world? Like hours a day. So procrastination comes into that as well, which is, it's the attention world. All these big conglomerate applications are fighting for every second of our attention through the screens. So, I think prioritizing and efficiency, you put it very well.
Yeah. And, this actually brought me to another challenge, which is more current, which is like, how do you prioritize, right? Like, what do you prioritize based on? I think that's one of those areas where you need some sort of framework to be, because those priorities change over time, right? Like every 6 months, every year, like those priorities can change. And so what I'm starting to work on is trying to have a framework that I can use to say, okay, like at each point in time, I can prioritize the things. So then when I'm within that set of priorities, I don't feel like there's things that I'm still missing out on, right? Because it's easy to say, okay, just prioritize, right? But sticking to it, like you said, is the even harder part, because your priorities, you maybe write them down in a notebook somewhere, but then you're going to have all these things that are always pulling at you. And you need to be able to have the confidence to say no to certain things, and the discipline again, to stick to the priorities. So I like how things are connecting here.
Yeah, everything loops back. It's interesting. But lastly, what do you think is the meaning of life?
I think the meaning of life is finding what your purpose is. And I don't want this to be a cop-out answer, but I think it's different for each person, because people are all different, and we have different things that, as we said, we derive passion and satisfaction out of. And so I think the meaning of life is finding our purpose and what we were created to do in this world, and bettering ourselves towards that direction as much as we can. Again, it's about the journey, because at the end of the day, it's we're only alive for a finite time.
Borna, it was fantastic speaking to you.
Thank you so much, man.
And I wish you all the best in your future endeavors.
Appreciate it, man. You too.
Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.